Live, and if you are seeing us, then that means things are working as they should. Fantastic. So I am previewing this broadcast on Periscope and hitting the go live button. Excellent, excellent, and excellent. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Association Chat. This is your weekly online discussion for the association community, where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I am the host of Association Chat, Kiki L'Italienne, and I want to give a couple of shout outs before we get started. Hi, Erin. Hi, Member Clicks. I'm so glad you guys are here. So first and foremost, I always want to thank our sponsor, our wonderful sponsor, Funtiva, the AMS for Innovation, for their ongoing support of Association Chat and the community here. Check out Funtiva.com to find out about Funtiva for associations, Funtiva for events, Funtiva for government, and more. You got to check them out, guys, Funtiva.com. And hey, by the way, do you have an extra $25 million lying around in the petty cash drawer that you can afford to lose? No, me either. So if GDPR is stressing you out, have I got some news for you? You can meet with the experts from the Trust Bridge in Washington, D.C., February 26th through March 1st, when they hold some one-on-one consultations and workshops while they're in town speaking at several events. And guess what, guys? No joke. They're offering a 10% discount to Association Chat members. So how do you know if you're a member? Good question. Well, if you're not a member, you should be, because it's free. So join the private Facebook group today, where the link is posted, or check out the podcast show notes for more information. And yes, the link here, I'm going to link it into the Crowdcast platform. The link is here. If you want to find out more about the GDPR workshops, you can also click on the green button to check out more information on their page. And with that, are we ready for the show? Yes, I hope so. Yay. So, oh my gosh. Experiential marketing has got the events industry all abuzz. Maybe it's because it's becoming easier and easier to tune out traditional marketing. But how do we know for sure? What do we need to know? Well, Liz Caruso is kind of amazing. That's our guest today. And you know how some people are a jack of all trades and a master of none? Well, Liz is seemingly a Jane of all trades and a master of all of them. I don't know how she's done this, but it's kind of amazing. She's a serial entrepreneur with so many awards under her belt. It's overwhelming, and I can't imagine reading them off to you, but trust me, in the description, you can find out. It's basically a novel's worth. But one of the things that she knows a ton about, and it was the first person I think of when I think about who knows experiential marketing, Liz, it's about engagement for events. That's what she's really masterful at. And that's why I want her here today for Association Chat. So welcome, Liz.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and talk to you. It's been a long time since Kiki and I had a good proper catch up. So I'm very excited.
I know. We'll start here, and then we have to figure out how to actually have like drinks or dinner together.
Yeah, this is not the same.
I know. But what about this whole experiential marketing thing? We're hearing so much about it lately. It's definitely caught the buzz in the event space. It's definitely got people's attention. It's exciting, but why are we hearing so much about it now?
Well, I think that technology, I think anyone who knows me knows I am a huge fan of technology and the way that it's implemented in our events. But it's become such an important thing in events because it has become such an important thing in our society. You can't go anywhere without people looking at their phones and their devices all the time. And local to me, I'm here in New York, and local to us, there are a bunch of towns that are actually banning texting and walking in addition to texting and driving, because it's just the way that people communicate. They're completely addicted to all of their devices, and that makes for distracted people, which means it's really hard to get their attention. And then the other thing is we have access to so many different sources of information. I'm sure if you guys have looked at like Facebook events, you're signed up for so many things that you didn't even realize you were invited to. I've definitely missed events and people are like, well, I invited you on Facebook. I'm like, that's like a huge world of stuff. And so it's just really hard to get people's attention. And on top of that, it's really hard to make a memorable experience that makes people want to come back again and again and invite all their friends. It's just very easy. Tonight, for example, on what is it, a Tuesday night in New York or in DC or wherever people are, there are a million options of what we could do tonight. Yeah. And how do you make people want to do what you're doing? I think that's really a hard thing for people. So everyone's thinking about how do we create better experiences.
And so how do we do that? How do we start looking at creating better experiences so that people are, building a relationship with us, or it's something that sticks out to them as of course rising above the noise, but it's something that they think, okay, out of all of these different options, I want to give my attention to this thing?
So I think that it's a really multifaceted answer to that question. But a few things that come to mind. One is you've got to create a really personable brand, especially for larger events. There has to be something for your audience to connect to. Mm-hmm. And I think that matters in your logo, your brand colors, the feel, but definitely plays out in the way that you interact on social media, the way that you use technology. There has to be something for your audience to engage with and to make that emotional connection to. And then the other thing is you've got to know your audience really, really well. And you have to understand where they hang out and what's really important to them. I've been spending a lot of time learning about personas, which you hear a lot about in the marketing world. And I think the reality is that event planners, especially if you're involved in the marketing of your event, you become marketers. You have to really think like a marketing professional, which is really hard when you're focused on logistics and timelines and budgets and all of that other stuff in addition to marketing your events. But I think part of it is knowing your audience and then figuring out how you can communicate with them and how you can get on the same page with them. But at the end of the day, it's about creating a relationship. And I think a huge piece of that is an emotional relationship. It's good that if they hear your name, they know who you are, but it's even better if they hear your name and they have a very positive emotional response to it. They think oh, I can't wait to see what they're doing. And so it's all about creating excitement and feeding into that connection. I think is super important.
So building that excitement, getting people to talk about you, getting people to build that emotional connection, it all sounds really good, but we know that it's harder than that. We know that, wouldn't it be great if we could just okay, Liz told me this, I'm going to go through and I'm going to check off my list and build my personal brand, build my brand. What do I do? So where can people begin? I think a lot of people are coming to this. They want to jump to the big exciting, I've done it, I've succeeded, but it's all these little steps in between. How can we begin to break it down so that it's a little bit easier for people to start taking those steps?
So I think the first thing is you have to think like an attendee of someone who is going to come to your event. And you really have to tap into that mindset. And I think that means that you want to really be that person for other events. So when you're attending an event, for example, you want to think about, where did you find out about that event? How did it catch your attention? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Would you go back? Would you not go back? And I think that when we're, especially on the planning side, we're so deep in the logistics and the planning for our event, it's very hard to see it from the outside perspective. To us, everything makes sense. I remember people will message us all the time and say, hey, where am I supposed to show up at 8 a.m. when the conference starts? And I'm like, well, how do you not know that? Because I'm so deep in venue contracts and I've seen it all. So I think part of it is living your life and really putting yourself in those shoes. And sometimes that means that you get focus groups of your attendees and you really start to get to know them. You ask them about their habits with social media, with technology, with content. What are they really getting excited about? And you learn that about them. And then you figure out how you can make that connection through your brand and through your event. And sometimes you just have to hire a consultant or someone who can come in from the outside and see your event I think in the events industry, we've all had this experience where you attend someone else's event and you can be super critical because you're seeing it from the other side and you think, I can't believe they're doing registration like this. And there was nothing fun. And the sessions were so long and the room was so dark. When you're on the back end planning that stuff, you're moving around like crazy. You're so busy and you don't see any of that. I always, when we host our conferences and events, people will come to us and say, so how was it? And I'm like, I have no idea. You're going to have to tell me how it was because we were on the back end. I don't see most of the content. I don't feel it. And so you've got to figure out whether it's consultants or your own attendees, you've got to figure out how you can get that information so that you can be really specific in targeting those people.
Yeah, I think understanding the audience is so important for so much. And people, I feel, I mean, this is my perception, but it feels like people's eyes kind of glaze over when you give that kind of advice, not you personally, but like if anybody gives that advice for anything, whether it's communicating through social media or whether it's talking about traditional or anything, they're like, oh, know your audience. Really? I know them. I so know them. And it does all the time, no matter how often it seems like you know them so well, you'd be surprised that when you break it down and you go back to that very basic step, people change, industries change, where they spend their time online and how they prefer to be contacted, that changes. And so that I think that's a great piece of advice. When we talk about experiential marketing, there's a lot that's in the media right now where people are talking about things where they show up and they are blindfolded and they're taken to a different place and there's all this different stuff that's going on. Um, and it's both exciting and I think overwhelming for some people who maybe they're trying to embrace some experiential marketing, but they're like, oh my gosh, I can't be blindfolding people. I'm going to get sued. So, like, what are some ideas that you think are good examples, maybe, of bringing in a little bit of experiential marketing that's maybe not going to be as scary for risk averse event planners and and the like?
Yeah, and it's a lot to coordinate. And you're talking about completely changing up your event, which is really scary. So the first thing I always think of is to streamline and think about the very simple things. So if we're talking about a great experience, that means that, the signage is really clear about where people have to go. The registration process is easy. It's easy to understand what the agenda options are and what all the things that are available. So focusing on that first and foremost is super important. And then I think the other key is integrating. Another thing that you can do that's really easy is think about ways that you can integrate fun. Some things that we've done, because that's like where you're going to make those connections. It's where, the magic happens, I always say. So one example would be at the beginning of our conferences. For Techie Talk Live is an event that we host. And one of the first things we do is we kind of like welcome everyone. And then we ask them to take a selfie and tweet it or post it on Instagram using a particular hashtag. And what's really funny is that people will immediately say, like, laugh with the person next to them. You could tell it's a very awkward moment. And I'll just stand up there and say, okay, well, we're not going to move on until everyone does it. So I'll give you a minute. Yeah. And what's funny is that I don't necessarily care whether they take the selfie or not, right? It's not that's not really the point. But the idea is that they're laughing with the person next to them. They're going to do it because people love taking selfies. So they end up taking a selfie. They take it with the person next to them. And then what we do is we take those images and we kind of like download them from the hashtags and put them on the screens throughout the event. And we kind of use the messaging that you are our event. Like, because of you, our event is what it is. So it's a way of integrating the people themselves into the kind of screens that they see all throughout the event. And in the beginning of the day, it's just a way to like get people laughing, talking to the person next to them. It seems so awkward and so simple, but it's just an example of a way. We've just kind of done away with coffee breaks at conferences because we kind of go with the thought that you're an adult. So if you have to use the restroom or get a snack, like, you can do that whenever you need to do it. And instead we break up the content with entertainment breaks. So we've brought in improv, we've done meditation, we've done magic sets. So instead of having that only at the cocktail reception at the end of the day, we work that right into the conference content. And it could be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And instead of losing everyone out of the room and then having to get them all back in, you actually can break up the feeling of the day by integrating fun. And then we just give them a really long lunch break, like an hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours. And that gives them enough time to use the restroom and network for real, like eat and actually still network instead of like shoving food in and then, oh, it's time to go back to the room. So little things like that make room for fun, and it makes room for a meaningful connection to you, to the content, to the fellow attendees. And I think that helps. And they're really small, simple, inexpensive things that you could do.
And Erin says, awesome ideas, especially the meditation. Thank you, Erin. And then we have John Chen. Hi, John. Two of my
Hey,
favorite
John.
people, he says. Thank you. He's watching on Facebook Live. Those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, there is a little bit of a delay. So some of your comments may come a little bit later when I actually, see them. But please do post your comments and questions, because that's one of the greatest benefits of being able to watch live, is that you can ask these questions to Liz while she's right here. So, okay, so these are some really great ideas for ways that we can safely bring in experiential marketing where it's not super scary, right? This is stuff that's pretty easy to bring on. Lisa says, I love the idea of making lunch longer instead of the mad rush to the buffet line. Makes so much sense. Yeah, and it does make you wonder, like, why haven't we been doing this sooner? So what about the before? What about leading up to? Like when we're thinking about getting people actually there before they're on site and experiencing all of this great stuff, what are some ways that you've seen that really works with experiential marketing reaching out to people?
So, a few ideas. I'm still a really big fan of paper or some type of mailed invitation when you can do something like that. It's so out of the box. Like everything is
Yeah.
online now. So to
Yes.
get, like a CD with an invitation, you put it in your computer, which is so funny because people have to figure out how to do that these days because most computers don't even have CD-ROM drives.
Yeah.
But even if it's just a paper invitation, again, something very, very simple, but it adds to that effect. I think keeping mystery is really interesting leading up to the event. So you might want to put on your agenda kind of like surprise session or surprise entertainment. And so you know that and you've planned it well in advance. But when people are looking at the agenda, they're getting very excited. We've also done things like tell people what to wear. So themes, I think, are really fun still. And I think a lot of people think of them for special events, but not necessarily for corporate. So for Techie Talk Live, for example, we tell people to wear bright colors. And our brand colors are neon green, orange, and pink. And so we tell people like, we want you to wear as bright colors as possible. So what we see before and what we do is people going to the store and like Facebook Living themselves shopping. What should I wear to Techie Talk Live? And we do the same. And so it kind of builds the excitement.
Okay, so let's talk. I want to dig into that a little bit more, because if there are people out there right now who are saying, wait, what? You're asking them to wear certain colors, like wear certain. I love that, because there are so many reasons I love that. I mean, obviously later your pictures, your marketing is going to look fantastic.
Exactly.
But I love the idea of you're already getting them into thinking about the experience. They're getting ready for it, and it is building up that sort of expectation and that buzz, which is really interesting when you think about a lot of events where people are just kind of like, when do I have to go? Oh, now? Oh,
Right.
okay. And it's like the last thing that they think about. So what are some other ways that people can, maybe think about? A lot of association professionals obviously are watching today, and they're thinking about maybe conferences that they have. They're like several day long events, and, the build out from that, when people actually register and are thinking and make that decision and argue for getting, getting registration paid for from their employer, that
Mm-hmm.
starts out so far out. Are there ways that you've seen experiential marketing really work in grabbing people? And I don't know. I mean, I didn't give Liz any heads up on my questions. So I'm just like, you tell me. But I mean, I think that, have you seen some things work that are kind of, because if they're deciding to wear their colors, that's like after they've already kind of made the decision, but further out maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the marketing, it's especially important when you're planning so far in advance, and you definitely need, it's more than just you're selling a ticket to an individual, but their boss needs to approve it, and there's a whole professional development piece to it. So it's a little bit harder to tap into just the experience part of that, which by no means, it doesn't mean in any way that you can't do that. I think one thing to think about would be to leverage influencers and to make it a very personal connection, because what we sometimes miss is that as a brand, we may not have a personal connection to attendee A, but we might have a connection to an influencer who has a really personal connection to attendee A. So identifying who the influencers are in your audience, and I just define an influencer as anybody who has an audience of their own. They might have like a really active Twitter account or a great blog, but when they register, other people register with them. And so I think leveraging those people far in advance of your event is a really key important thing to do. You could, and it doesn't always have to be like financial compensation. You might offer them front row influencer seats at your event. You might offer them a really exclusive discount. I use a ticketing platform called Bizzabo, which I love, and they do double-sided rewards. So the ability for, let's say I buy my ticket, and then it gives me a link to share, which I'm sure you've all seen that part. Mm-hmm. And then if people actually use my link to register, they'll get, let's say, $20 off, but I get $20 back on my registration. So wow. I have the opportunity to earn my entire registration fee back. I get my cash back by getting a bunch of other people to sign up.
Right.
So it's a really big incentive to get people to share. And even if they're not like an influencer with, 50,000 Twitter followers, everyone has some colleagues or some friends. And so the more you can get people coming in groups, it's going to definitely help with that connection and camaraderie on site, because they already have an emotional connection to somebody.
Okay, so I just have to say, first of all, great tip on Bizzabo, you guys. If you're not thinking about that, that is motivation. That is something that's going to make an influencer want to invite other people, of course, even if they're not what you would think of as an influencer. The fact that they are connected to your ideal audience, that's all you need. You're really thinking about who is your ideal audience there. And so I'm seeing people on Facebook Live saying, I've seen less transitions make a meeting more efficient. Yes, that's so true. And I see more and more of you popping on. So it's great to see you over here, everybody, talking about experiential marketing with Liz Caruso. It's so hard. I take a pause before I say your last name.
Me too.
She says Liz King Caruso, Liz Caruso. So when we're starting to think about, so we've talked about getting people there. And I have to say, it is interesting how you always dive back to thinking about that audience whenever there's a question like that. So if we're trying to reach them before, I like how you were thinking about, okay, so influencers, think of that audience. How do you get influencers to tell more people? And how can you bring in that experiential marketing at that point? When people begin arriving and there is that engagement that begins, you've talked about the part leading up to it where people can begin getting shirts of the same color, wearing bright colors to match with your theme, to match with your brand. What are some things that when people actually arrive on site, they're there? They've gotten to your event, they've gotten to your conference. And what are some things that can happen that can surprise and delight and build those relationships or build those memories while people are there on site?
So I think the comment about surprise is exactly what you want to think about. You don't have to blindfold people to surprise them or to put them outside of the element. And anytime somebody comes to an event and they have an expectation of what they're going to get, and in any way they're shocked and surprised in a good way, then it's memorable, right? So I think about things that you can do with your entrance. For example, we've worked with a company called Luminescence Productions here in New York. And they have something that's basically, It's like a big pipe and drape. Well, it's basically an entrance that you walk through. There's no drape. But they basically project images onto fog. It looks like a waterfall. So they call it a waterfall activation. And so when you walk in the door, it looks like there's a waterfall and it has your brand logo or your image. And it's before they get to registration, is how we've used it. And then they actually have to walk through that to get to registration. And it is the funniest thing because they're interacting with this stuff. They're like, am I going to get wet? Of course, you don't get wet at all because it's just water vapor. But it looks so weird. So you see people laughing again. They're like putting their hand in, trying to see if it's going to get them wet. The design and what's being projected can change pretty frequently. But it's like one of those things, just catches people off by surprise. They then go through and they're in registration. It's something that surprises them right away. Another thing that we've done is there is the mobile app. A lot of conferences and events use the mobile app, and they often have like a gamification part where you can give people points for like checking in to sessions or for checking into the event or for doing various things. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was incentivize people to make really meaningful connections with fellow attendees, because we know that that's one of the big reasons people go to events and why they come back. So we did set it up in the app to be able to give people more points for connecting with someone than they get for, let's say, checking into a session, because everyone is checking into sessions. And then what we did was we created this extra layer in person where we made fake branded money. It was just fake money, but it had our brand on it. And it was in different denominations. And we had a team of volunteers or staff who decided that they were following this like rule that we set. So if they saw someone go up and introduce themselves to somebody else, they would go up and let's say give them $100. And then if they saw that someone go introduce themselves to somebody in the corner, they would give them $1,000. And if they just saw two people having like a really good conversation, we're not really sure who started it, they might get $5. So whatever the rubric was. And then what we did is for the whole first half of the day, we were just passing this money out and nobody knew what it was for. So everyone was, what is this for? It's building this element. We're like, don't worry, you're definitely going to need it. And then what we did is right before they went to lunch, we're like, you guys are probably really wondering why you're getting this money. So this is what you're getting it for networking, for making relationships. And the better the relationship, the more money we're going to be giving you. So that was the most productive lunch hour I've ever seen.
Wow.
And people still didn't know why they were getting this money. They just knew what it was for at that point. And then what we did is at the end of the day, the people in the app who had the most points got extra cash, even though it's totally fake cash. And then everyone had what they had earned throughout the day. And what we did is we had sponsors contribute different prizes, which we wrapped all in the exact same box and put like the sponsor logo on the front. It was everything from like a 99-cent wrap for your headphones to an iPad. And wow. So the people then bid on these items, but they didn't know what they were bidding on. And so what was great is we had people saying like $1,000, $10,000,
and they would open it cash that they've gotten for introducing themselves. So they're like, okay, exactly. Whatever.
Just think, they're happy to spend that money. And then they would open it and it would be like this little tiny thing. And everyone would kind of laugh about it. And what I found really interesting was not only did it really feed our goals throughout the day and add that fun element, but by the end, we had people pooling their money together and like bidding, $100,000. I don't know what happened there was like a group that went in together and somehow won an iPad. So I don't know how they decided who was taking that home, but there was no bad blood. It was just like it fed into our goals so well, added fun. It cost us nothing to do. But I think it's that element of surprise and doing that right when they get there, there's something happening. They don't really know what it is. I think is a good way to keep them engaged, or at least to get them engaged.
Absolutely. And guys, hey, I feel bad for the people who are not seeing this because this is some really good stuff. I love these ideas. Megan says, and hey, Megan, she says, love the cash exchange networking here at Campus Connects. And Love the love the cash exchange networking here at Campus Connects, and they are doing speed networking, but it's only for a limited audience. What a great idea. Thank you for sharing. So yeah, that's a really good one. I think that where people feel limited is probably maybe at this point they're thinking, all right, so I'm not sure if this is going to work. I'm not sure how to pitch this. This sounds like a really great idea, but I'm all about this, trying something different, but my boss isn't. So, what are
Yeah.
maybe some ways that they can approach maybe some pushback in that direction?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a question that comes up all the time with this stuff, but also with event technology. Like it sounds great to do RFID, but who's going to pay for it and approve it? So a few keys that I always say. One is you've got to tap into a pain point, whether it's we have trouble every year with getting people to register for this event, or people come, but they never really want to come back, or people come, but they're all in the breakouts all day, like in the common space working and chatting, and they don't go to the content. Whatever it is, you've got to figure out what is the problem that you're trying to solve. People are obviously going to be much more open to a fun idea that addresses something they recognize as a problem as compared to just something extra to do, because nobody wants to work harder for no reason. And then another key is to think about the smallest version of that business development. It's called the MVP, the minimum viable product. So I want to launch like a new soda brand, but what's the smallest thing that I can launch to test that that's really going to work? And so you want to think about the greatest experiential idea. What's the simplest version of that? And try to pitch that and talk about how it addresses this need. And if it's really successful, you'd like to take it to this great idea. Because I think people really are willing to test ideas, but they're not willing to put tons of resources and redesign their whole conference. So for example, one of my huge things is that I just think so many conferences and events are an hour session, coffee break, hour session, lunch.
Yeah.
One of the biggest ways that we can keep people engaged is by super shortening our sessions. I remember the first time I did an event and we said we were going to do 4-minute sessions. And our speakers were like, we can't do a 4-minute session. I always speak for an hour. And I was like, well, you'll just have to figure it out. Best content ever, because they get rid of all the filler, all the fluff. Now, okay, I'm not expecting that anybody's going to start doing this. You're going to change your whole conference to 4-minute sessions. I also wouldn't necessarily recommend that. But what if you did like right after lunch, 3 4-minute sessions or 3 5-minute sessions or 3 10-minute sessions, and you just see how it works. And it doesn't require you to change your whole life and your whole planning process, but it lets you test that idea. And then you can see if people are like really engaged and they love it, you can work that in bigger ways for the next event.
Yep. Erin says, also get feedback on your MVP. That's a great way to take it to the next level and make sure the improved iteration hits the mark. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I am a huge fan of lean startup.
Yes.
That entire model. You just build the smallest thing, you get as much feedback, and then you iterate, and then you do it again, you get more feedback, and you iterate. And that is much more palatable. It's easier for people to swallow than, a full event transformation, which sounds great, but it's just complicated.
Erin's like, amen, you're nailing it. Currently geeking out over here. That's awesome. Well, I think that you're right. I think that it is easier for people to take those steps and to iterate and to get bigger and to maybe try something new and then try something new and to keep building on that. And I think they get braver. But, I think that, when we're looking at traditional setups, traditional formats, and we're going away from we're going away from experiential marketing to like experiential meeting design and that type of thing. But I think it's important for us to do that because that's the whole point. You're building this relationship and you're staying consistent with that relationship that you're building for this excellent experience with the attendee. Greg says, love the idea of short sessions right after lunch. Have seen some organizations do that to allow attendees to preview the afternoon session leaders and lets attendees get a preview and choose where to go. Yeah, that's a really smart idea, actually.
That's a great idea.
Member clicks.
Right around that. Oh, sorry. Okay. Right around that 3:00 hour when people are getting really tired and just very sluggish, or right after lunch when people just ate a big meal it's just a good time to mix things up and try something new.
Yeah. MemberClick says ASA did that. Great ideas last year. They had 30-minute sessions, hour sessions, and 2-hour sessions all running at the same time and in all different formats, lecture style, hands-on, panel, etc. It was great and kept me super engaged. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. So we've talked about the before you get there. We've talked about the during. What about after? You know, there's not a whole lot of talk about experiential marketing or hardly any marketing at all after the event is over. So does it happen? Is it out there? What are some good ideas for people to continue building that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, foremost, the easiest way to market your upcoming event is to not lose the attention from your last event, which is what so many people do, especially for an annual event. You finish it up. I know as the planner, you're exhausted. You're like ready to think about something else. And then you jump back into the planning, 3 or 6 months later. But our attendees can't have that lapse because if you're going to make that emotional connection, they got to stay connected to you. So in addition to being event marketers, we also have to be content creators. I think that plays a huge role in keeping people engaged post-event. And so things like sharing your video recordings from the conference, instead of uploading them all at once, spread them out over time. You don't necessarily have to create like a ton of fresh content to keep people engaged. Another thing is one thing that we do at the event is I like to take a group photo of all the attendees. We actually did this at our wedding too. You get everyone together and then you take a nice panoramic shot of everyone. And something like that shared on social media gets so much more engagement than an album of 300 photos because you're tagging every single person in one picture. And I'm really a huge believer in making your event attendees feel like a family. And so ways that we can do that are through little pictures like that, where they feel like this is our family picture.
Yeah.
But also, after the event, keeping them engaged through like family dinners or family chats. And those are regular pieces of content or engagement that you can do that don't require a lot of time and attention, but it makes people feel like they're continuing to stay connected with your brand. And that way you don't lose all their attention and then have to start all over again.
Absolutely.
3 months before your next event.
Okay. So Greg said, love that. Make your event attendees feel like a family. Yeah. And, actually, I'm not sure if John's still on from earlier, but I know that he's done some stuff like that where he's used a drone where it's been safely done, where it's, cast out from a distance, but all of the attendees are there in front of the property, and it just makes this great image that everybody can hold on to, and I think that that's such a really great idea because we are looking for building stronger bonds in those moments. The way that we spend our time, we want that. We want that to be meaningful. And so going to some other beige anonymous event is not something that anybody wants really to do,
No. And competing against so many different events, if your event is the one where they had like the best time and they made so many great connections and they learned so much great content, it's going to be so much easier to get people coming back year after year.
Okay. So let me go into the direction of, okay, I know that I've got this expert Liz in front of me and I want to do something phenomenal. I'm not afraid, Liz. I'm not afraid. Lead me in the direction of doing something really exceptional. Where would we start? How would that process begin? And you know me, I'm willing to try a lot. So bye, Megan. Sorry you can't stay on. Check it out later in the recording.
Bye.
So lead me through. What would you do? How would you guide me to okay, let's create this killer experience at this event that I've got coming up?
So I think if you are ready for that huge transformation, the first thing is to throw everything that you've done out the window. And just really try to rethink your event strictly from that attendee perspective. So I think getting a focus group of some of your most engaged attendees from the past, but also make sure you have some of your least engaged attendees, people who maybe came once and never came again. But the thing is, if you get all your fans, they're going to basically tell you what you want to hear, and they're already sold. So getting them to come back year after year is not necessarily hard. what you want to learn from is the people who came and don't really seem engaged with your brand at all. So then you want to ask them things like, what other events do you attend? And also really get to know your audience. This is where I'm learning about the persona. So for example, let's say your audience tends to be millennials in a certain age range and they love going to hip hop concerts, or they tend to be a totally different demographic. You start to understand your audience, and then what if you designed your next conference or event like the other fun events that they choose to go to, that they shell out a ton of money for? So let's say that they love going to hip hop concerts. We don't have to throw a hip hop concert, but what about that is what they love? So you kind of start pulling ideas from them and from looking at other industries, because I think there's so much we can learn from various industries. People love going to CES, for example. What is that about CES that's so exciting, that's different from an event tech conference? There are so many different ways that people are making connections. Sometimes it's about the size, sometimes it's about the format, sometimes it's about the timing. I mean, little things like maybe your attendees like to sleep in. So starting your event every year at 8 a.m. is losing them before you've even gotten them. Yeah. So maybe your event will make more sense from 10 to 7 p.m. So whatever it is, I think you have to be at that point willing to kind of let go of the standard and redesign, but completely with your attendee in mind.
Food for thought. I mean, I want to do like an association chat event, like official event, but it's just, I feel like, oh, where to begin, where to go, because I don't want it to be like everything else. This is awesome. So that was fun. I've got to pretend or not even pretend, but practice this exercise later.
Yeah.
Okay, so for your own events, I know that you've built Texie Talk, you've built businesses, and you've just been incredibly successful in what you've done. I know that I've actually participated in learning more about some of the personal branding that you were talking about before. And so how would you say that someone who is watching today and they're thinking, okay, I really want to use experiential marketing to make my next event or my next conference better, but maybe the branding is something that I'm struggling with? What's some advice for them there? Maybe they understand their audience really well, but they're worried about their brand.
I think it has to be in line. I mean, I keep going back to the audience only because that's the driving force of our events. It's why we hold these events, is to bring those people together. So I think that, it's about making sure that the design of the things that you've designed, whether it's your logo or your colors or your online persona, matches that audience needs. I think a lot of times people have developed their brand. So I think about what kind of company I want to start. And then I develop the brand that I think is so beautiful. And then I put it out there. And then I build the audience.
Right.
And then you realize my audience, I think that this is beautiful, but my audience doesn't necessarily care about that look and feel. And so you might want to kind of flip it around and just be open to how you might make it a little more interesting. I think also just making sure that everything is really thought out in terms of consistency. So the reality is people might love you. And Kiki, I know people love you, but they're seeing you and millions of other people every single day on their Facebook feeds and on Twitter. And so it's about consistency, even down to your profile picture being the same across all different platforms, at least being very similar. Similar colors, for example, really, really matter. I'm a huge fan of, even for big brands, having a person's face on your various social networks.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, it should be I'm scrolling so fast that I know exactly who it is because the brand is so consistent. So thinking about the fact that you have very limited time, your message has to be very concise and very consistent so that people can get it no matter where they are. I actually just was looking at my Facebook feed earlier and I saw 2 people commented, and it's funny. I thought they were the same person because their picture color, the shirt, is a man and a woman. But it looks so similar in terms of just the, not obviously the face, but everything else at a scan. I thought it was the same person. And there have been plenty of times where I look at something online and I think whoa, who posted that? And I realize it's someone that I know, but they changed their whole look. And I think that that's really hard for people to keep up with.
Yeah, yeah. Unless you have one of those friends that changes their hair color wildly, like from one to the other. I'm completely with you. And I'm pretty mindful about that, but I feel like, with association chat, it's started, the community has built up before I even had an idea about any kind of branding behind it. And so I'm like trying to catch up to the community. But one day. Peggy says, Kiki, do that. An association chat would be
It
fantastic.
would.
Association chat event. Everything on this crowdcast is gold. Gold. Yay. Well, thank you. I'm really enjoying it. I tell you what, every time I hear from Liz, I'm always learning something new. So, okay. So experiential marketing, going back to the topic of the day, what do you think that people can do to sort of, I guess, learn more or grow in this way, or continue to develop those skills?
So one is stay tuned to stuff outside of our industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important to be passionate about whatever it is you're passionate about. I love cooking. I love music. And I go to a lot of cooking classes and music events, and I learn every time I go somewhere. I learn about the way that they've orchestrated things, the way that they've marketed, and the fun and interesting things that they're doing. And then, just in terms of publications, we have great publications in our industry, but we should definitely be reading outside of our industry as well, especially tech related. Another thing is you have to try things even if you hate them. So my example of this is Snapchat. I hate Snapchat. I just do not like it. But I
Yeah.
tried it. I downloaded it. I figured out what it was all about enough to decide that I hated it. And what I learned from that experience though is when I first started using Snapchat, I noticed that you swipe left to pull up certain menu and you swipe right to pull up other things, as compared to clicking like menu and then you get a drop down navigation, you click where you want to go. It's a lot of swiping. And now we see that with Tinder and lots of other apps, that is, the navigation is swipe related. It's not like your typical navigation. Those little things really matter, because that is part of, again, what I talked about very early, which is the stuff that's affecting and changing our society has to change and affect our brands and our events. So we start seeing that, and automatically I'm thinking, okay, so what's the future of event websites? If my event website has a traditional navigation, my audience is going to be swiping like, how do I get to the page I want to get to?
Yeah.
So you got to think about that stuff. And it's really just about exposure. You have to put yourself out there and read a lot and push yourself, because these kind of ideas they don't come to you on a plate, and they're so specific to your audience and your brand, and they have to feel really authentic to you. I can't, unless I come and spend time with you and learn your audience, you can't just take someone else's ideas and throw them at your event and they're going to work. So it's about living it and really making sure that you're figuring out what authentically feels fun for you, what feels like your brand, what's going to reach your audience. And that's about putting yourself, I think, far beyond our industry.
I love that answer. I'm working on a project right now where it's the part that I'm working on right now is the landscape report, which sounds really boring, but what they're expecting includes this part that's about analogous thinking, where you're basically looking outside of the industry that they're in, and you're saying, these are big things that I see happening in these different areas that could apply to what you're doing. We could apply some of these pieces to what you're trying to do with your digital transformation or whatever. So I see this as being something that you can do, just not just in a project like that, but in your events for sure. You're talking about read outside of your industry, read outside of the events industry, and look for things that are happening around you. And the other thing that we're talking about is we're talking about being able to, you know, um, build these relationships, but develop these feelings, making people feel, developing these emotional relationships with people. And because of that, I think it's important not just to look outside of your industry, but also to think about those feelings. What are the different ways? So, a number of things that you've brought up. you brought up the waterfall action or whatever that the luminescence folks do. So it's feeling, it's seeing, it's touching, it's smelling, it's like all of these different things, even building up a sense of mystery throughout an event. Like, what is this cash that I'm receiving? What is this all about? So I think that that's kind of one of the big takeaways that I'm going to leave this chat with is that you want to be constantly thinking about how to make people feel, and what are the most compelling positive feelings that you can create. We don't want anger, right? We don't want like jealousy. We want something that makes people feel good and increases that excitement. What's your favorite sense? What's your favorite of the five senses? What's your favorite sense to play on when it comes to experiential marketing or anything like that?
Well, so I think that, laughter is something, it's not a sense, obviously, but it's something that I'm naturally drawn to. I love stand-up comedy and I love making people laugh. But in terms of the five senses, I really like to play with scent, the nose. If we do a holiday party, we're trying to infuse different scents to make people feel different things. I know that, department stores do that. You walk in and they want you to, like, bakeries, for example, sometimes put the scent of freshly baked cookies, even though everything they have in the back is frozen. The idea is if you smell it, you're going to want it, and smell, especially for corporate events, is one thing I don't think people expect at all.
Mm-mm.
And so whether it's calming or exciting, I just think that's a really fun sense to play with because it's so unexpected. I think people go for touch. They're looking for something very techy and interesting. There's some that are just kind of standard, but I do think that's a fun one.
Huh. What would be a good way to like incorporate that as a speaker into your like presentation? I can't walk around. They probably don't want me to like pump stuff into the room when I'm going there. But if I'm going to make let me make this great experience for people who are attending. What's a way that I could do that and not get kicked out from ever speaking at that event again?
So it doesn't always have to be like an overwhelming, like fill the room kind of thing. But I recently went to Disney. I don't know if you've been there recently, Disney World. They have a new ride for their Avatar land, and it's very similar to Soarin' for Disney fans that's over at Epcot. But this particular ride you get on, it's like almost like a motorcycle looking thing that you sit on. And then the ride is a 4D experience. So as you're basically flying like an Avatar, the movie, and it's amazing, breathtaking views. And when you fly through the forest, you get like a little blast of pine. And when you fly through the ocean, you get a little blast. So it's the smell along with just the presentation part of it. So if there's something really dynamic that you're doing that's really interesting as a speaker, and you just want them to feel it for a second, there might be the ability to just kind of blast the scent out. It's only going to last for 5 or 10 seconds. Not something that's going to change their whole event and make them kick you out, but might be a really good way to, add that extra scent in there.
I mean, I just have to say, would it not be the coolest, most maybe OCD thing, but like, would it not be the coolest for me to like have different points in my presentation where, okay, and it's a fresh idea and then a blast of pine. It's imagine yourself at peace by the sea and it's like ocean smell, I don't know.
Talk about unexpected. Your attendees are going to think that's the best session ever.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Let me look over here to Facebook Live. Patty says, so true. What works for one doesn't work for all. Plus, you can learn from non-associations. Just doing what everyone doesn't may not be the best way. Great points. Yes. Oh, Liz, any final words for everybody? Where can people find you? Where should they find you? What have you got going on? Tell me that.
Okay, so Liz King Events is our event planning company. So if you're looking for kind of help in that realm, physically planning something interesting, we do some event consulting, so just helping brands figure out how they can work this in. We also do this fun service called Mystery Attendee, where we actually, you can hire us to attend your event as an attendee, and then we produce a report for you about what that attendee experience was like. So that kind of helps you get outside of your world and will help you understand that your registration lines were way too long or the content got a little lagging around 2 p.m. So some of those things that people may not be able to think about. But probably what's most relevant to everyone here is that we run Texty Talk, which is an online blog. And we have Texty Talk Live coming up on April 20th here in New York City. And a lot of the examples that I gave today are actually from that event. This is our conference for other event organizers to learn about technology and smart experience for events. So it's a full day conference, and we have that coming up very soon. This is actually our 10th Texty Talk Live and our final. So we're wrapping it with a nice bow. And if you've never been, you definitely have to be at this one.
That's so cool. Well, I'm so glad that you joined. And everybody, what did you think? I know this was just absolutely phenomenal. I want to thank our guest for joining us today. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you
for coming on to Association Chat. And thanks to everyone who's watching and participating, no matter where or when you're watching or listening later. Please share, like, and subscribe to this show in whatever channel you find it on. If you weren't aware, we do have the podcast, which is the audio podcast that you can listen to later, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, all your usual spots, iHeartRadio. Or you could even become a patron of the chat on Patreon and show the chat your love financially each month. But until next time, everyone, keep asking questions to learn every day. As Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Have a great week, everyone. All right. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. You're such an engaged audience. So great.
I love it. Bye, guys.